Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
What kind of metrics? Well, you have hard questions.
Yeah, this wasn't. We were wondering if you happen to have a copy of the organizational chart or something along those
Do
lines.
we
But
have it? It would be online.
would it?
Well, because we're a small office, so
Yeah,
basically, we have Mike at the top, because he's the vice president,
Okay.
and then I guess below Mike would be me, because I'm the assistant vice president, and then below or even, I don't know how that would be exactly, but we have Carla Richard, who is the pre-award person.
The
Pre-award. All right,
Okay.
so let me tell you a little bit more about the office. So let's
Got
start there.
Okay.
Okay, so the Office of Sponsored Research, or the Office of Tech Transfer, our purpose or our goal, I think that's one of your first questions, is to facilitate externally funded research at UT Tyler.
Okay.
So we want professors that are submitting grant proposals for getting external research to support their academic endeavors.
Okay.
So an example of that, I'm also a biology professor, and so I do biological research. I have a big lab. You may know people that work for me. And all of that research, I pay everybody, and they're paid on external funds.
Like grant.
Yeah,
Okay.
so off of a grant. So, for instance, I'll have money from the USDA APHIS to do my glassy wing sharpshooter project or something. And so I'm able to hire a bunch of grad students and undergraduates and try to bring in high school students, So that's kind of the model of what you want funded research to look like. Sometimes if it's somebody in social science, history, something like that, they might be doing something where they're the only one doing the research.
Yeah.
So they don't have a lab where they have a bunch of students that make their life more difficult usually. They make it better. Don't write that. They have something where, anthropology is a good example.
Okay.
Where we have an anthropology professor, and he can get funding to go out and make sure that somebody's not building something on a Caddo Indian
Yeah.
burial site or something like that, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, the purpose of this office is to help support faculty in trying to get funding.
Okay.
So that's why we have Carla Richard, who is the pre-awards person.
Okay.
So if a faculty member finds, that they have a good idea and they would fit into NSF, some other acronym, then they'll communicate with her, and they'll say, this is what I want to do. We need to get all the paperwork put together, grant proposal stuff. You have to have tax ID forms from the university, and you have to have conflict of interest forms that are uploaded. It all goes through grants.gov, and they ask for all of these things. So Carla helps get all those things put together for upload. The faculty member puts the proposal together, does all the writing. She's not going to come in and tell me how to write.
Yeah.
A grant proposal to look at glassy wing sharpshooter.
Just all the technical
Gene
aspects
X, Y,
of
Z.
it.
Yeah. That's all the faculty member. But it's more of a support role. So she'll come in and she'll, make sure that everything that is asked for in the RFP, the request for proposal, is being submitted.
Yeah.
Because usually any of those big agencies, if you mess up and you put 3 letters of support instead of 2, or you forget to include this form or that form, and you don't tell them this, they're like, sweet, we don't have to review that
Already,
one.
yeah.
Done.
As
So
well.
she makes sure that all of that is done. So she also makes sure that the budget is filled out correctly, make sure that if you're hiring somebody, you have the right insurance rate, make sure that you have all that stuff before the funding, because you have to put in a budget with everything, make sure the budget forms are all filled out and
Okay.
all that information. So she helps take care of all of that. She also serves to make sure that She kind of looks over any agreements, or following university policy and UT system policy. And then she also makes sure that, I think she's technically in charge of making sure that we're in compliance. So she's kind of our compliance person to make sure that, faculty, but as it has to do with research, that faculty are compliant. We're not breaking any rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, we have Debbie Gibson, who is our post-awards person. So if somebody's lucky enough to get funding, they are going to need to have a budget, account set up. They're going to need to make sure that their people are spending money correctly, that if an agency requires that receipts be turned in for travel, that receipts are turned in for travel so that, we're not expensing things that don't, Then she'll also make sure that reports are being filled out correctly. So if you get money from, Texas Department of Agriculture, at the end they want a report. What did you do with our money? How did you spend it? What results did we buy, basically?
Yeah.
And she makes sure that that gets turned into the right person, on time, that kind of thing. So she's not going to write the report. Faculty member will write the report.
Yeah.
But if a report is coming due and you have a...
Keep you on time and on budget. Here's what needs to happen with
Do you
it.
know how faculty are?
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of unfair. Like sometimes they show up for class late and it's okay, but you show up and it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they come to this office thinking the same thing. And federal agencies that give you money, it's kind of like taxes. It's like doing your taxes. Like no matter how you feel about doing your taxes, you got to do your taxes.
Yeah.
And so if you have a good tax attorney, they'll make sure you do, right? Or,
Definitely.
well, not much further along than you guys, so TurboTax tells me that keep getting emails, get your taxes done, April 15th. So anyway, she's kind of like TurboTax.
Gotcha.
Sends an email
I like
telling
it.
you need to
I
get
like
your
it.
taxes done.
Okay.
And then she'll do some account management and stuff like that. And then in addition to her, we also have Brandon Reynolds. And Brandon is our intellectual property and technology transfer person. So if a faculty member or a student finds, figures something out that is patentable, like right now I have something that's moving through the system to kill fire ants. So
Okay.
tech transfer, basically if it's something that at some point could be marketable, the university wants to protect that intellectual property, that IP.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that it goes through that system. So Brandon is our first step on this campus to getting that process started. So you fill out forms. If we were a larger university, we'd probably have our own tech transfer office. But it's managed through this office because it makes the most sense. And then we actually utilize resources at the system level to oversee most of that. So you have to get lawyers that do a background check to see if anybody else has already submitted that patent, or if this is patentable. At some point they may pass judgment and say your idea is really dumb, or they might say your idea is really great, but
Yeah.
I don't know that that'll ever go to a market, because they don't want to pay the money to patent things that won't ultimately,
Okay.
Yeah.
they don't want to patent just for patent's sake,
Exactly.
because in my circles it's pretty cool to say, yeah, I have
Got a
a patent.
patent.
You know.
It doesn't do anything, but it's patented.
Yeah, it's patented. And patenting, there's two steps. There's a provisional patent. You can put that in. It costs about $100. But then if you're going to do like a patent, you have something that might turn out like Gatorade from the University of Florida.
Yeah.
You might want to get that protected.
Mhm.
Otherwise you're going to lose a lot of money down the line.
Mhm.
So his role is kind of the first step in that process. So I guess that's our structure. And then we also have Christian, who is our assistant to the vice president, I think is her title.
Okay.
And so she makes sure that and she works part-time. She also works, I think, for the Ingenuity Center. And then across the hall is Cheryl, and she helps with pre and post award service, kind of making sure that additional support for those things.
She's also an assistant, basically, Cheryl.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly.
Are they both?
her
Well, are they
position-
both part time, basically, or?
Yeah,
Because Christian's
yeah.
part time, you said,
Yeah,
and Cheryl will be part time as well, so she probably more aligned with
I
that.
think so. I think she's technically full time, but her position is split between the Ingenuity Center and
Oh.
our
Okay, so
office.
there's split
Okay.
positions.
Yeah, split. Both of them are split positions.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're both full time, just split positions. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get that straight.
And then, like Mike, I think he's finally 100% in this office. I'm 50%. My other 50% is in biology.
Yeah,
Random
it's-
question, do you happen to know Acacia Servin or Connor Littrell? I know they
I know
work
Connor.
for, yeah, Connor, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're friends of mine, I know they
Okay.
work for the biology, so I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, Connor, he's just getting ready to be done, isn't he?
Mhm. Yeah.
And who's the other person?
Acacia Servin, that's his girlfriend. Been together for a while.
Sure.
She's also in biology, graduating in May, so.
Yeah, well, I was still teaching cell biology when he went through,
Mhm.
so she probably went through
Yeah.
after that. Because I was the hard professor, and then people are like, it was a dream come true that I wasn't going to be there giving people a hard time.
Yeah.
So she probably waited. Wait to take the hard class when I'm
Right.
Let's see. I guess one thing I'm noticing, it seems like a lot of these people aren't working here solely.
Correct.
For instance, you told me you're 50%, you're a professor.
Mhm.
Cheryl's 50% here. Christian's 50% here. Carla,
Full time, and Debbie's full time.
and all
And
the
then I
time
think
here.
Mike is.
About to
He
be full-time.
hadn't previously been, but I think he is now full time.
Okay, so previously this was probably just the way the office was created, just got people working on it part-time then. Okay. And was that everyone that entails the office, and Dr. Odell, Dr.
I think so.
Bechstein, Debbie, Carla,
Unless there's
Brandon,
somebody else on the website,
Christian? No?
because I'm a professor, so I do get forgetful.
That's
So you better
fine.
fact check everything I say.
Yeah, I think we're good so far. That kind of entails a goal. I guess one question that kind of goes back. You said you handle all external funds, that kind of like grants and stuff, basically. Is it just grants, basically? Research grants? Is it
Yeah,
just
grants and research contracts.
contracts then?
Yeah, so it would be different. So if somebody donates money, that's not us. That's the
Just
development office.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, which would be somebody else. So if somebody rich in Tyler wants to give $1 million to put their name
Name
on
on
a
the building.
pharmacy, yeah, we don't do that.
Okay.
All of ours has to do with research.
Specifically
Yeah.
research
Okay.
grants, research contracts then.
Yeah, sometimes research programs, I guess.
So if any faculty member, for instance, any staff, well, I guess not staff, but any faculty member were to come across a grant, is it necessary for them to go through this office in order for it to get done correctly,
Yeah.
or could they do it on their own?
Well, I think technically they could do it on their own, but if they're using university facilities and everything,
Then
they
it
have to
needs
go
to
through
come through
us. Yeah, so, I mean, it is, faculty could, like if Texas potato growers came and asked me to go down to South Texas and check out their situation,
Mm-hmm.
I could technically do that as an additional job outside of
Yeah.
the university.
Without using the university.
Yeah, but if I'm going to bring samples back,
And use
I'm going to
the-
pay my students to, crush things up and extract DNA and test for things. That needs to go through. Yeah.
So it just kind of depend. As long as no university, I guess, support in any way is used in any kind of
Yeah,
form,
then
I
I think
guess.
you could do it.
I guess any kind of, like if, for instance, let's say you take money or something, or
Mhm.
whatever it may be, even if you took a student with you,
Yeah.
especially if you're paying them.
Yeah. So it's always better if it goes through the university. Plus, you have to pay tax on, if you're an independent contractor.
Yeah.
Set yourself up back to taxes. Make your life a whole lot worse come April. Yeah.
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 I know about that.
Yeah.
Definitely know about that.
But then you're also, you're covered if you're traveling and it's official university business. And,
Keeps everything documented and in line and registered. And
yeah.
Okay.
So we're really here to help faculty, do that, not to try to steal money from them and that,
so does this office get a percentage of the grants, or
It depends. So
they get funded
the
through
way,
that kind of way, or like that?
well, there's money that comes from the university to
Okay.
support this office. So like the pre-award service, the post-award service, and the vice president all get paid basically out of university budget.
Yeah.
And Brandon, I'm not sure if it's changed. I can't remember the exact how that works. But some of that gets paid on what we get paid, sort of. So
Okay.
you can probably find more eloquently said, but basically what happens is if I'm writing a grant proposal to a federal agency, NSF, NIH, USDA, things like that you've probably heard of, and other ones that have an N as the first letter in their acronym. They usually have a standard, what's called indirect cost rate, IDC.
Okay.
And so that rate is usually anywhere, depending on the agency and the program within the agency, it can be anywhere from 0% up to like 47%, I think is our negotiated rate as an agency. So if a faculty member writes a proposal to NSF and they get funded and it comes with full indirect cost recovery, then let's say that proposal is $100,000. There's going to be an added indirect cost that comes with it that'll be $47,000.
Mm-hmm.
So the university will actually get $147,000.
Mm-hmm.
That $47,000 then will go to indirect costs. So I'll explain that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So state agencies usually have a lower indirect cost rate, anywhere from 0% up to 30%, I think, depending if it's Department of Education, Department of Ag, Health and Human Services, stuff like that, things that go Texas Department of blah, blah, blah. And so that IDC works the same way. If you're getting money through a foundation, or you're getting money, so like the McKnight Foundation is one that I've sent proposals to. It's a guy that invented Post-its.
Cool.
He wants to give money back. Bill Gates wants to give money back through the Gates Foundation, things like that. Oftentimes, they'll request 0% indirect cost recovery. So they expect that the university ponies up the money for support.
Yeah.
But what the indirect cost recovery does is it's money that when it comes to the university, and this is all negotiable and different based on the university, but a portion of that budget goes to the president, a portion of that budget goes to the provost's office, a portion of that budget goes to the VP for business affairs. So the president has that money so that he can help support faculty to do things, or students, or whatever he wants to do, research type things. The provost has that money so he can distribute that down through the department or the colleges. For me, it would be through arts and sciences, and then biology, and ultimately down. So president gets a chunk, provost gets a chunk, business VP gets a chunk. Because if you're doing research and you're using lab space, it's July, this is Texas, you probably want air conditioning. If you're going to work at night, you probably want light bulbs on.
Little things like that.
Things like that.
Inconvenient.
Support.
Yeah.
Support type stuff. Part of that money, I think actually part of the provost portion ends up coming to this office, because we have to pay somebody to do, pre-awards, we have to pay somebody to do post-awards, we have to pay somebody to do contracts and, things like that, support type things. And then a part of that money also comes down to the PI. So when I got here, the principal investigator would be the faculty member that wrote the grant. And so you end up getting 5 or 10% of that indirect cost back as the professor to kind of support your lab.
Yeah.
So what I use my money for is to start new projects. It's seed funding. If I want to hire Connor because, I think you know, I have this little pet project that I want to do. It gives me a budget to be able to do that.
Just to start with, if you
Yeah.
need, yeah.
And then the other way that the office is funded is through the state as a institution of higher education. If we pool together all the money that we spend
Mhm.
on research, that would be our expenditures for the year. That goes into some kind of formula that gives us money back. So the more money you expend in research, the more money the state gives you to help support the research that you're doing.
Yeah.
So the two pieces of funding that come to this office are indirect cost recovery, which is directly tied to the amount of money that, or number of grant proposals that we get,
Mhm.
money that we get, and money that we spend.
Yeah.
And then also the state money that's directly tied to the amount of money that we get and spend. So then, you know, the money that comes into this office from the university ultimately is kind of an investment in us trying to make sure that we do the research.
Yeah.
And the research is the most valuable thing that we do, in my opinion, at the university, because you guys are at a university.
Yeah.
And so that means that the professors that are teaching you are experts in the field of study that they're teaching you, which means they do scholarship. So at a university, you want to be taught in the classroom by a biology professor that actually does research
Yeah.
Mm.
He
and
knows
can
what
give
he's
you
talking about.
first-hand knowledge.
Current, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, so that scholarship, that academic pursuit is what is different about us as a university from somebody that's at a college or a junior college or a high school.
Mm.
You know, if you go to one of those places, you want, you know, instructors, you want teachers. At a university, it's a little higher expectations. You want somebody to be a great teacher. You know, you guys do ratemyprofessor.com type thing, so we don't always, you know, you know, not all professors are created equal, I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
Been there.
But you know, but at a university, the difference is you want this research to happen. You want this support because you want
That higher
researchers
quality.
that are teaching. Yeah, you know, and so that's why this office is important from my
Yeah.
view. I mean, that's what I think. So,
Okay.
so that's where the funding. So there is some hardline funding, which would be just like, you know, you have to pay to have a dean,
Yeah.
you know, or you have to pay for some administrator. You have to pay hard money to have people in student services. Yeah. So there's some money that comes that way, but then we have the opportunity to bring in more capital and try to get some more research funding. So for a university like UT Tyler, when I came 10 years ago, that's when this office actually started. And I came as an assistant professor. I didn't get up here until last year. And, you know, at the time we had expenditures somewhere in the $200,000 range. And so that's not very good for a university. When I came, it expanded a little bit because I had a pretty good little program. And then a couple of years later, Mike came and brought his program as an endowed chair. And he wasn't in this office either. And now we sit at somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million a year in expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
Massive improvement.
That's our growth is
Yeah.
exponential. So what we invest in this office, you know, from hard money, actually does come back out. It's
Yeah.
kind of like funding development.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can look at it and as a student go, and what's the point? You know, that money's going somewhere else. You know, that money should be going. I can't believe we pay Jerry Iverson and this person and this person. You can look at the books. You know, you
Yeah.
can go over to the library
Yeah.
and look it up. You can go, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're paying. I don't know what it is. Oh. How does that money not go to students? This is a university. What a mission. Well,
Yeah.
but that money ultimately gets paid to a person
It does,
who
indirectly.
goes out and gets more money. You know, so it's an investment in the university's future. You know, you can look at the president's salary and say the same thing and be like, oh, what a horrible world we live in that we have a president that gets paid so much. Yeah, but that you can't discount the work that he does and goes out and gets resources and
Fund
stuff like
everything
that. That
else,
funds
yeah.
everything. It's you know, not as black and white. When I was a student or even an assistant professor, I didn't always think about that. You know, it's easy to go, I'm an assistant professor in biology and we don't get enough, and there's these people upstairs, what a bunch of jerks, they all make all kinds of money. Don't put that in there. But, you know, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess one question is, how do you actually kind of measure how well the office handles the grants? How do you know that the grants, the process of handling the grants and the research and the money ultimately the grants?
Well, so the easiest way to do it is to look at numbers.
Okay.
You know, and I don't have any hard numbers I can give you. We could probably get that. I think Mike has it somewhere on file. Christian could probably dig it up. But we can look at the number of proposals that we're submitting every year. You know, we can look, is that increasing? We can look at the dollar amount. You know, it's pretty easy to look at that $200,000-$300,000 10 years ago to where we are now. You know, and measure growth and everything. And the other trick with that money is how you look at that money is a little different too, because not all money is the same. You know, if you have something called direct research funding, which is what I do. So if I get money from NSF, USDA, NIH, something like that, that's considered direct research funds. And our calculated rate of return from the state is calculated on direct funding. And we have another thing which is more like educational funding that Dr. Odell gets, which is not direct research funding. It's program funding. So he does educational programs, brings in a bunch of money to, you know, make sure that there's after-school programs in the greater East Texas area, and brings in a grant to make sure that, you know, underrepresented minorities have funding for X, Y, Z. These, I mean, does all these kind of cool STEM area type things, but that's not considered direct research fund. So that is viewed differently at the state level. So, so we're measured on, a lot of times, on direct research expenditures, which is parsed out from, you know, the programmatic funding. So there's different ways you can measure it. So you could measure it through dollar amounts, number of proposals submitted, number of proposals successfully funded, ranking of proposals that were funded, you know, because sometimes you don't get funded, but they'll send back a ranking that said that you were excellent, but didn't quite reach the funding line. Then you investigate it further, and it hurts your feelings because you were number 4 and they funded 3, or you remember 8.
They tell you that kind of information?
Yeah,
It's
they
kind of
depending on the agency.
Okay.
A lot of times they'll just give you a fundable, not funded, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But depending on the agency, you know, they'll do it differently. The federal government is a lot
Different kind of
more,
feedback.
you know, X's and
Yeah.
or crossing T's and dotting I's, so they give you that kind of stuff. It can hurt your feelings. Sometimes you'll get a horrible proposal, don't fund, you know, not part of our, you know, what we want to do, that kind of thing. But you get feedback back. Or you could also look at, and we've tried this because they wanted it through SACS accreditation and stuff, how well does our office do? So you put out a questionnaire, much like the opinionaires you guys fill out for professors.
Mm-hmm.
And the trouble with that is the people that do well usually don't fill them out. People that hate you fill them out and they're mean.
Yep.
You know, or if they're pushed to do it, people that like you just put 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, you know, and don't give you very credible feedback. So, you know, so how do you rank? You know, kind of is always a questionable thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have things we do so that it, you know, follows the guidelines of accreditation and stuff. But getting meaningful feedback, you know, it's better at the end of helping somebody through the grant process, saying, hey, how do we do? You know, is there anything that we should have done that we didn't do?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's really more credible feedback that we get.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you know who it's coming from and, you know, everything. But unlike a professor, I don't think that information always has to be anonymous. You know.
Yeah.
Because you probably don't want to write a bad review of Dr. Bexton if you took him in cell, if you're going to have to take him in cell Malek again.
Very
you know.
true.
It's not that I actually care, you know, but I mean I do care. I don't mean it that way, but I would never you know.
In a perfect world, it wouldn't matter at all, but, you know.
Well, and I would never give somebody a bad grade if they gave me a bad evaluation. I'm not petty, so, and I'm tenured, so.
It doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as that kind of stuff, it doesn't. But, you know, as a professor, what you guys probably don't realize is somebody like me gets into this because, believe it or not, we actually want to change the world. We feel that education is so important. So I'm up here 50% of the time. The other 50% of time downstairs, I'm supposed to be running my research lab and stuff. It's supposed to get me out of some of the teaching that I'm doing. But I'm volunteering right now to teach 2 classes because I think our students need certain things. I'm volunteering in the fall to teach a class in science versus pseudoscience because I think people get tricked into buying crap they shouldn't, and people get afraid
That
of.
sounds interesting.
Well, people get afraid of vaccine, and it's geared towards non-science majors. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do a soft sell and not, tell people they're, misinformed, but try to say, well, here's the evidence. So
Yeah.
let's look at evidence and let's
Here's
make a
reality.
decision.
Yeah.
Do vaccines cause autism? Absolutely not. Absolutely no scientifically credible information that says that it does.
That's a problem.
Right?
I didn't know anybody would believe that.
Oh.
See, I'm one of those that's like panicky about vaccines. If I don't really have to have it, then I don't really get it.
Oh,
Well,
I just
anyways.
don't
But-
like
but-
flu shots.
Yeah.
Well, but the whole thing, and you don't necessarily, the people use an argument, well, I don't want to get a flu shot because, it's probably wrong, it's probably whatever, and so next time.
I've never had a flu shot that
Well,
way.
next time, so the way it works is that it's not going to catch every bug that's out
Yeah.
there. You're
No.
ultimately going to run into other things. But what it does, it's forecasting, and we put together models, and we have an idea. This last year there were 4, strongly probable viruses that were out there that was geared towards taking care of. Doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. You might. Your arm might hurt afterwards.
Yeah.
Your immune system might get kicked up. You might get a little bit of a runny nose because your immune system's turned on, and that's a response.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they gave you the flu. Doesn't mean anything. But what it does is they give you
Catches the bigger ones.
the antibodies. So
Yeah.
then you have the antibody. Your system is primed.
Mhm.
Maybe you will catch that virus.
But it
Maybe
won't
you'll
make
be
you
sick
bad.
for a minute or two before it kicks in. But what you're really doing is a certain portion of our population has to be immunized to have an effect for those that can't be immunized. So next time you're wondering, go to a children's cancer ward and look at these children that don't have strong immune systems or on drugs that won't allow them to get this. And then think of them dying of flu. Because we didn't hit the percentage of people getting the vaccine to stop that being pervasive within our society. So when you haven't gotten your flu, you've killed kids that have cancer. So
Directly.
that's the hard sell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I say that jokingly, but it's.
I never thought about it that way though either.
But
Almost
it's
if it don't.
and people, it's called herd immunity, and that's the idea behind it.
Okay.
But anybody that's immune compromised, elderly people, small children,
Yeah.
people with autoimmune diseases, that's kind of why you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the benefit is if you do catch something, you may not get sick at all, or you might get sick for, a day instead of a week,
Yeah.
that kind of
exactly.
thing. And vaccines are safe. I have a pretty good understanding of how they work, of course. And
Just a
I
little
can
bit.
tell you there's no giant U.S. government conspiracy to inject you with things.
Yeah, that's
and-
me. Like mass
Yeah.
production, I'm good.
Oh, boy.
Well,
Don't stab me with anything. I'll be
You
okay.
know,
Conspiracy theories.
I'll risk it.
And then the other thing with virus, then we can get back to whatever we're supposed to be talking about. But we also, the world has been asking for medical answers for things. So you want a way to cure cancer, right? The problem is that cancer isn't just one thing. It's a moving target.
Yeah.
So we have different things that cause cancer. If you get skin cancer, most likely the cause was ultraviolet radiation. Gets into your skin cell, gets into your nucleus, causes an error in DNA. That DNA error then is passed on and happens to fall in one gene usually because it's on the outside of the chromosome. And we have pretty good understanding of how these things work. Other ones, so a way to cure cancer, wear sunscreen. Kind of easy.
Done. Check.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
You
don't
too.
tan.
Probably you more than you.
Or you
Yeah,
don't,
right.
or you don't tan.
And
Well,
and so, but I mean, things are going to happen. You're
Yeah.
going to have moles. Make sure you check your moles. Make sure you check moles on your feet. People don't know that's one place where things usually grow and people don't notice them. And it's like a bigger percentage than most other places where skin
kinda
cancer
funny.
starts.
that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I go get a mole check every year because I do ultra running and Ironman stuff. So I spend a lot of time outside. And I'm 40, so I'm starting to get odd-shaped moles. So whenever I get one, I'm like, I need to go ask her if this is a problem. So every year she looks me over and goes, yeah, let's chop that one off, just to be sure. But viruses also cause cancer. Because what they do, viruses get into cells, they get to your nucleus, they dock, they inject their information, they stick it somewhere in your genome. It replicates, uses your machinery, you kick out a bunch of viruses. Those viruses move into other cells, and then infect those ones and then kick out to more of them. And then, that's how viruses get along. They're fantastically awesome, right? And one that we know about well is the human papillomavirus. And we know that if girls between the age of 10 and 14 get vaccinated for the HPV virus, that it actually causes a 93% reduction in cases of cervical cancer later in life. 93%. We can, in a generation, solve cervical cancer. It's simple. We're already solving like a lot of lung cancers because of the number of people smoking has gone down over recent years.
Yeah.
And so like my daughter, we talk about smoking. I have two daughters, 11 and 9, and they just can't even imagine ever smoking.
Yeah.
My generation, it was a little different. It was like,
It's cool.
it was cool. You wanted to, be like the guys in Greece, right?
Yeah.
And have a cool car and smoke and stuff. But, your generation and younger, I think.
Extremely
The message
negative
is being-
Much more aware of
campaigns.
yeah.
the
Extremely
stuff.
negative campaigns.
But, I still have people that work for me, and every time I'm like, you realize that makes me think you just have really bad judgment. That's what I think. That's my
when
response.
you've been told your whole life no, and then
Yeah, but, whatever.
given reason, of course.
So, but the human papillomavirus, but the problem that we have with that is people get this message that it's unsafe, and we'll get to a point probably in the next 10 years where boys are also encouraged to get it because there's other types of cancers that are being associated with human papillomavirus. And the problem with virus naming is that once it's named, it's associated with something. So that's associated with that. So if you have cancers that are caused by HPV that aren't cervical, then Michael Douglas recently came out, his throat cancer was related to HPV infection. Yeah, so then it's like this social connotation that's,
Yeah,
that's
no, I get
difficult.
it.
But anyway, so that's what my class will be about. Well, that's
Cool.
the-
That's a little
That's one
preview.
thing.
A little preview for that.
But I also, we're going to talk about other things because, like homeopathy. If you go to the pharmacy, you might go now and you're like, oh, I don't want to pay that much for Sudafed with pseudoephedrine in it. So I'll buy the thing that's just on the aisle from Nature's Best or whatever.
Yeah.
That says it calls, then
Bottle's green, looks organic. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you're like, oh, but do you know where that brand of science came from? It's back in the Middle Ages. Now I can't make this up. They would they would take prisoners, and they would give them things like arsenic and these different heavy metal compounds that basically kill you. And then they would watch the people and they would see what symptoms they got. So I'm going to give you a bunch of lead, right? Force feed you lead.
Lab rats.
Oh wow.
And then we're going to watch what happens to you. Like you get hives. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of lead and we'll dilute it to the point where it's actually not even probably in any bottle that they give you. And then we will, if anybody ever gets hives, not from lead poisoning, just in general, we'll give them this highly diluted lead because that will solve the problem. That's where homeopathy comes from. So if you ever buy those products, what you're actually buying is usually like water, oil, or these different things.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so you're actually buying nothing. And if it works,
Paying a lot of money for nothing.
yeah, you're paying a lot of
Actually.
money for nothing. And, you know, I mean, there's a psychosomatic part to it. So if you feel like you're taking a pill, you're gonna feel. So people that are apologists for homeopathy are usually saying, but it actually does work because people feel better.
Mental things, yeah.
It's like, well, let's look at the biochemistry and let's look at, you know,
Yeah.
reduction in virons, or let's look at, you know, immune response and see if your, you know, expression of different things. None of it is, and there aren't any fewer virons. You just think you took something and you feel better. But anyway, so, you know, people that don't approach things with a scientific view don't know to think about it critically in that way.
Mhm.
You know, and so the problem that I have with that as a professor, to get back to my original point, is that, you know, I'm passionate about making sure that people are educated and that they're knowledgeable, because ultimately, whether or not you're a biologist, you're going to be part of the voting public. And
That's a
if,
scary thought.
yeah, and you're helping to make decisions about the world, and so you should be informed about them. And if some crazy professor with odd-shaped moles from running marathons, you know, sticks in your head when you're thinking, you know, are vaccines a good thing? Well, he was crazy, but he said yes. He knew. It seemed like he knew what he was talking about. But so, what we do in this office is to help support research so that people on this campus are experts
Mhm.
in
To
something,
know things like that.
and so they know things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's why you, as students who pay tuition, should want this office to be here. You know, and that's the reason behind it.
Okay.
Very cool.
Sorry.
No,
I'm not-
that's great.
I'm not lecturing as much this semester, so when I have a captive
You miss
audience,
it.
I take every opportunity.
By the way.
She hates
I
it.
like it.
If you weren't here, Christian would be getting an earful.
No, it's interesting. It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I kind of lost where we were at, but let me see. So we've already covered how the metrics that you've used. That kind of covers, like you said, you use number of proposals, the amount of the money to the research, and I think one thing to go back is that you kind of look at the more or less the quality of the research as well, even if you don't get the money or you don't get the grant.
Yeah.
So you kind of still looking into that. You use mostly, I guess, what you get back from whatever foundation or whatever organization sending you back the feedback.
Yeah.
So that's how you usually.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's done externally, which that's interesting, not internally. Okay.
Yeah, well, and you know, one of the reasons that's important is that, you know, this office made up of a biologist, technically a geologist, and support staff. So if somebody puts in an engineering proposal, I'm not going to know. I'm going to be able to read it and tell whether or not grammatically it's good,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to be able to speak to the science or
Yeah.
if it's important in the field. You know,
Yeah.
so those external reviews are really important.
Yeah.
You know, and that feedback's really important.
Yeah. Okay. So that covers the
Ooh,
metrics.
we could also count the number of publications that come from published research.
Okay.
So the other half of the academic thing is that they, and we do that also because we look at number of publications that came from the funded research and stuff.
Okay.
So that also would speak to the quality of the work being done. And ultimately that's all peer reviewed by people in their field.
Yeah.
So yeah. So all this is reviewed externally in some way or another,
Yeah.
basically. Okay. Number research. Just put this on there. By any chance, I don't know if this is be intruding or anything, could we get a copy of the organization chart? Kind of outlines, I know you're changing right now the name and everything. Is there any way of like, I've already written down the people and then
Yeah.
kind of that, would that just kind of entail the chart itself or?
That's pretty much the chart. Yeah, if we have one that's up to date, I can email it to you. I
Great.
can ask her if we have it.
Great.
But I don't know with changes this year if we've done that yet or not.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
'cause that was pretty recent. You told me 3-4 months ago you changed the name, so and then
yeah. Well, and then when the budget, you know, they just went through the budgets stuff, so that changed kind of where people are getting paid and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's kind of a moving target also.
I guess one quick question that we can, because I already kind of went how the grants are processed. Who do you well, here's a question. Who do you report to, for instance? Since you're working kind of dual roles right now,
Mhm.
you kind of go
So I go to, for my biology stuff, I go to biology chair Srini, and then above him is Marty, and then above him is the provost. From this office, you know, I would go to Mike, or Mike then reports directly to the provost.
Who also goes direct to the provost.
Yeah. Yeah, so this office doesn't belong in any of the colleges.
Yeah.
It's, you know, part of the administrative makeup, similar to business affairs.
Yeah, it just kind of serves the whole
student
university
services or
wide.
athletics, I guess.
Yeah. Serves the university as a whole. So that kind of covers who you report. Would you say, this is kind of a question I didn't write down, but would you say there's ever maybe a conflict of interest that you've seen in this from working in this office? I mean, of course, if anything through biology comes in, you're like, oh, that's cool. But if anything like through...
Yeah, but we don't really make too many decisions that, you know, impact those kind of resource allocations. We do have an internal grant program, but that is done in done in parallel, working together with the Research Council,
Mm-hmm.
which is which is a faculty committee. So, yeah, I don't think there's conflict of interest there. I don't think we really have any that I can think of.
Because y'all don't do any kind of filtering at all. It's whoever wants to apply for a grant or apply for
Oh,
a
yeah.
proposal.
You just help them.
You just send
Oh,
them through.
yeah.
It's not any kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of this, so far, there's a lot of this office seems like it's a lot of compliance and just getting the grant
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
processing it, basically. So you kind of indirectly get paid from the grants, not really though, at the same time, because the money trickles down to the president, and then the president kind of brings the money back to you.
Yeah.
But by the sounds of it, I mean, everyone's kind of part-time, so it just kind of ends up being,
Yeah, and so those,
they're dual roles,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, but, you know, positions like Cheryl's and positions like Christian, that part that is in this office comes from, you know, either that state return dollar or indirect cost recovery.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could have more Christians and more Cheryl's if we have more research dollars coming in and
Yep.
keep making that circle bigger.
Indirect cost. All right, Cody, do you have any other questions? I think we've covered everything really that we need. And if you could get us a copy, if you happen to have it.
Hey, Christian, do we have an organizational chart for research and tech transfer?
Mike might, but not that he's given to me that I have access to.
Yeah, I'll ask Mike.
Let me ask Debbie real quick and see if she knows.
Okay. If not, you might have to.
Yeah, that and the
Maybe.
mission statement.
Is that on the website?
I think we were able to find
I
that.
think Jessica said she found one.
Did
Yeah,
she
yeah,
find
yeah.
it?
I
Okay,
think
if we
that's
can
on the
find the
website.
mission
Yeah.
thing, we should be fine.
I
But of
think
course,
she said to be due.
we'll have to put it in the paper that they're under review because they're changing the name. That's another question. Has the goal that you just told me before changed much? I mean, of course, the process have been refined and things have been tweaked a bit, but of course,
No, I think the
mission
big thing-
itself.
We've always had the responsibility of technology transfer and intellectual property, but they wanted that role to be more formalized, I guess.
yeah.
And I think that's probably in our initial, or in our mission statement.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but really the only change with the name is kind of comes from the system, because the UT system has a push for more technology transfer, because they're saying dollar signs if we have more intellectual property.
So it keeps the university
protected.
happy.
Yeah, so, you know, and one of the funny things is that people like me, professors, keep working on something forever. You know, whether or not it has value or not. You know, and publish our papers and give away all of our intellectual property, and somebody else goes and makes money off of it and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So they want to capture that kind of thing as it's coming through. So they, you know, just want a concerted effort to see if there are things
Yeah.
that do have value.
I emailed Dr. Odell for you.
Okay, thank you. And you know, so I think that's where the name change comes from,
Okay.
and it's kind of a system push,
Gotcha.
and the president agrees with it. So, yeah.
All right.
Where does-
And if all that goes through, I'll be out of here and I'll be a billionaire. Or I won't. So I'm betting on the latter. I'm not counting any chickens before they hatch. But who knows?
All right.
Everything we have?
Yeah, if you have any other questions, just email me and,
Sure.
you know, was that what you were looking for?
Yeah, we got. I think I got a lot of information out
Yeah.
of this. I got
Yeah.
basically for our paper.
Okay.
And at the end,
Yep.
but please get Dr. Bechstein back in a classroom so he doesn't take my time. Tell me about things I didn't come in to hear about.
Well, that was interesting. But don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I do think it's
I
interesting
like
personally,
that.
but you know.
I'll have a story to tell when I get back.
Yeah, it'd be nice to cyclists if you're driving.
Always.
We share the road. We have as much right to be there as you.
That's true.
Very true. All right.
So I guess those are the recommendations. All right. Well, if you need anything else, email me.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yep, good luck on the paper. Get an A.
I will try.
If you don't get an A, take my name out of it.
Oh boy. Thank you. Okay, please.
Yeah.